All right, I think let's get started. It's just gone 5 o'clock. Welcome, thank you very much for joining me. It's still quite a cold and dark January evening here in Berkshire. And if you're a regular watcher of our webinars, you'll see I have changed my location. I'm actually in our sitting room, but we're in the process of renovating and things, and my normal den is occupied by visitors. So it's a bit echoey in here, but there's a fire, it's nice. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about marketing technology tools in the sustainability sector, and based on our research and analysis that we've done looking at more than 200 companies in the sector. And it's an area of focus for us alongside health tech and other B2B technology firms. So we're coming at this with 20 plus years of experience in marketing for companies that are trying to make the world a better place. We build websites, we do branding, we do thought leadership content, and we do marketing automation in HubSpot. Last of the parish notices, and then we'll get to the report. Almost the last, I should say. There are more webinars coming in the pipeline. I'm doing one next week on HubSpot pricing. So if you use HubSpot, I can help you make sure you get the best possible price at renewal. If you're thinking about HubSpot, I can help you figure out how to optimize the package and get the best deal going into that. So that's next week's webinar. I'm looking forward to that. After this webinar, if you want to learn more about the topics that I'm covering, about marketing technology in tech stacks in this sector, we have a detailed report with all the findings. When you get this PDF sent to you, you'll be able to click on that button in the cartouche there and read it. It's also available on our website. So I recommend this as a sort of follow-on to the webinar. And if you'd like to discuss with me anything about it, I'm very happy. You can email me, matthew@articulatemarketing.com. You can go to articulatemarketing.com/meet. And that's my calendar on there. Delighted to have a chat, delighted to help if I can. Okay, so let's get to the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the data sources that we used and the kinds of technology that sustainability, environmental tech companies are using, and talk about some of the trends and comparison points. And you can see already that WordPress, HubSpot, Salesforce are prominent and common. Probably isn't a surprise to anybody, but we'll talk about some of the other things as well. So we looked at 244 websites, and we're using some tools that look up the DNS records of those sites as well, so we can see some evidence of tech stacks and tools that are being used through the DNS records as well. We used a tool called WhatCMS that does some clever analysis to figure out what content management system these sites are using, and then we sort of munged it all together in Excel and analysed it, and that's what went into this report that I'm running through and the documentation behind it. We've also done this for health tech, so there's another 300 odd sites that we looked at, and we did this survey a couple of years ago as well. So we're seeing evolving trends, so yeah, that it's grounded in some real data, and you'll get some opinions. But let's get right to it. So looking at the top 10 things, probably not a surprise that WordPress is most common. It is running a large proportion of the websites on the internet. Probably not a surprise that Google Analytics is widespread and common, although we have some commentary on that. HubSpot, in the last couple of years since we last did this survey, is much more common than it was. And the presence of HubSpot in a tech stack or in WhatCMS could mean a number of things. It could mean that people are using it as a website's content management system, and or as an email system, and or as a CRM, and or as technical support. For example, Ecology, which is a former client of ours, they sell environmental offsets. They use a different platform for their website, but they use HubSpot for sales and marketing and customer support. So multiple tools being used, and HubSpot tends to show up once regardless of what it's being used for. Salesforce, very common for CRM, Little bit of marketing out of Salesforce, but typically if people are Salesforce houses, they're using Pardot as well. Not seeing that very widely, probably for good reason, I think. And then we're seeing a little bit lower down the list, but common, MailChimp, which is historically an email platform, but has increasingly been, moving into advertising and lead gen and a kind of CRM functionality. Matomo, Piwik up against Google Analytics, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Hotjar is very interesting. It's not the only tool for tracking how users engage with websites. Lucky Orange is one that we use a lot. But the fact that it makes it into the top 10 is very interesting because it shows that people are interested in usability, user experience, user journeys, and tracking that with Hotjar. For what it's worth, 9 times out of 10, if not more, when we see Hotjar in a client or a prospect's tech stack, they're collecting the data, they're dropping the cookies, they're imposing the page weight, and nobody's looking at the results. Perhaps I can opinionate more on that later. So, in the report, there is a lot more data, a longer list of tech tools, marketing technology tools, but those are the ones that we're focusing on in this report. I think the growing presence of HubSpot and the absence of any other visible CRM in the top 10 and possibly betokens a relative decline for Salesforce, and that certainly reflects HubSpot's very ambitious and aggressive move into the CRM market. Horses for courses, Salesforce is the incumbent, it's the one to beat, it's very widely used. I think we'll talk a little bit about the trade-offs and the benefits with HubSpot. And I'm not here particularly to sell HubSpot, it's just interesting to see that evolution. I think Piwik and Matomo, these sort of slightly more privacy-focused analytics tools, are a sign that certainly in EU, UK, where the GDPR regulations are in force, that cookie tracking, that sort of very intrusive or potentially in privacy intrusive sort of analytics tools, it's coming to be questioned, I think, and perhaps in the environmental and sustainability sector, as with health tech, we found you've got people who are a little bit more sensitive to some of these issues. While you can't beat the price of Google Analytics, if you're not paying for something, kind of you are the product. And certainly we are seeing a growing interest in not being on Google platforms, not being taking things for free and providing data to big multinationals. It's an interesting evolution and trend, and I think if you're interested in privacy and data protection, you're on the side of the angels. Surprisingly little evidence of video. Now, I'm not a big fan of putting a video on the homepage and saying that's going to solve all the problems. Typically, videos where you have to click play get a relatively low level of engagement, even on popular pages. And videos that just are the homepage, and I noticed the tool I'm using here for this is Riverside. They've got a video playing on the homepage. Has to be implemented very carefully to avoid it being a very heavy burden on the page weight, especially on mobile devices. But it's a really important and growing part of people's marketing stack, and I think it's a tool that can be used very effectively. We're living in an age of diminishing attention spans, arguably, and a more video-centric sort of TikTok mentality. And I think I would expect these tools to be more increasingly prominent, and when we run this survey later this year again, I would imagine both of those things will have ticked up. For what it's worth, at Articulate we use Vimeo more than we use YouTube, or we recommend it, we implement it more. It's slightly more privacy focused, it's slightly less page heavy, and also you can white label it so it's not obvious that it's Vimeo, and you're not running the risk of people going off platform onto YouTube and then seeing adverts from your competitors. So I'm interested also to see how many fairly serious sustainability environmental websites are using YouTube, when again you're sort of the product if you're not paying for it, and there's a little bit of a risk with that. So I think the presence of Vimeo is actually more interesting and kind of more of a sign of maturity. I think. I would say that, wouldn't I? That's what we use. Good to see MailChimp. It's sort of the entry point for a lot of marketing, email marketing, lead capture. Certainly, I've used it on a number of sites over the years, and I've found it easy to use, and it's getting more and more sophisticated. Also, Monkey. It's quite nice, the branding. I think it also, because it is primarily an email tool, talks to the fact that people, even though it's a relatively small percentage of websites, the fact it's in the number 10 list, talks to the fact that people are interested in email marketing. They're interested in subscriber acquisition, they're interested in lead generation, they're interested in, typically with MailChimp, you're signing up for a newsletter, or you're signing up to get an asset like a white paper or guide or something. And I think, and I've done other webinars about this, and if you email me or book a meeting with me, I'll give you the more detailed Bore for England rationale for it. But I think that email marketing is increasingly important, again, because it's that sort of middle and bottom of funnel engaged relationship. And if you're writing emails that people genuinely want to read, you can position yourself very effectively with email. Just putting a sign up for our newsletter and sending promo emails without any value, not so good. I think the role model for this is Substack rather than sort of spammy emails. But I think email is interesting and growing. So I talked a little bit about Hotjar already, so I won't go over that again. And I want to get into a little bit this discussion about WordPress and HubSpot. So it's interesting because, in a sense, the other dilemma choice that I want to talk about today is Salesforce versus HubSpot on the CMS side. And Salesforce is actually the high-end industry standard, sort of nobody got fired for hiring IBM kind of choice. And with WordPress, it's a little bit the opposite. HubSpot is potentially perceived by people to be the more expensive option. Not necessarily on HubSpot's starter, but potentially the more expensive option. And WordPress is free. I mean, it's open source, sort of. I mean, okay, you can get into debates about Mullenweg and but free isn't necessarily good. For example, if you actually think, and we've done this because we still have a couple of WordPress sites under management from the old days. If you have a well orchestrated WordPress site with good hosting, content delivery network, you pay for Yoast SEO rather than install the free one and never activate it. You have some proper A/B testing, some proper security. You pay somebody to maintain your WordPress site because you need somebody to, because you've got to update it every month and so on. The cost of running a well-managed, well-hosted, performant WordPress site is very, very similar to the cost of HubSpot Content Hub Pro. So to do it right, £200-300 a month. And the fact that you can get it for free doesn't necessarily mean you're getting all that functionality for free. The other challenge we found, and probably out of the 120 websites we've built on HubSpot over the last few years, at least half of them have come from WordPress. And what our clients report is they find WordPress very hard to use. They tend to have to pay developers. So there's usually a developer in tow somewhere on a support contract, and changing pages is fidgety and fiddly, and doing things is fidgety and fiddly. Now, HubSpot also requires a little bit of effort, but it's designed for marketers to do marketing and for marketing teams to build website pages. So I think, and I don't want to be misunderstood, I'm not trying to say WordPress is not a good CMS, and it's not. It self-evidently is. I still run golfhotelwhiskey.com on it. We have a couple of sites under management on it. And it runs a significant proportion of the internet. And it is possible to build extraordinarily good, lean, efficient, customer-focused websites. And it's possible to run enterprise websites on it. A lot of sites that you use every day are on WordPress. So fantastic, not knocking it. But I think for companies that are growth scale, startup growth scale, and mid-market, companies with small marketing teams and no developer resources, I think there's a consideration about whether it's the right choice, and it's easy to default into making the wrong choice with that. This is sort of talking about very similar issues. I think the last point on this slide that is worth zooming in on a little bit is around integration and automation. So one of the things that we notice whenever we look at a WordPress site, and we look at a lot of them because we do a lot of sales conversations and growth audits and marketing strategy sessions and things, and typically they have between 10 and 20 plugins. So each one of those plugins has been written by another company, so effectively that's another piece of software running on your website. And in some ways that feels like a great strength of WordPress because there's this community and this resource that you can go get plugins, but actually it's also a risk and a weakness because each one of those things needs to be maintained, updated, supported. It's a security vulnerability if you want to properly audit all of that. And although most of them are free or free to try, to get the full functionality you often have to pay, or you should pay. And that can add quite considerably to the cost of running a website. In HubSpot, much less the case. Most of the websites we build, there's no additional third-party code in it. It's just running on HubSpot. The analytics is running using HubSpot Analytics, and typically also people want to plug in Google Analytics, and we do that. So there we go. My opinions. There's blog articles, and I've done a webinar on HubSpot versus WordPress. And if you ask me, I can give more specific commentary and advice on your website or whether it's worth moving or staying or what's going on. Salesforce is a different thing. It is very interesting to see that. It's the dominant and incumbent. There's not signs of other CRMs in the top 10, or indeed. Apart from MailChimp to some extent, other marketing automation tools in the top 10. And it's been around a long time, it's very successful, and it's very, very flexible, very competent. But again, is it the right thing? And I think it's very easy and typically we see companies hiring a sales manager who has used Salesforce before, or they've got, particularly in the sort of growth stage businesses, they've got investors, VCs who say, you should use Salesforce because it's the standard. And all of that, is true. Except it comes with this incredible sort of drag of complexity, of cost. Typically we move people off Salesforce and save them 20, 30, 40% coming to HubSpot. It's glued together, for example, with Pardot and some of the other things. They're through acquisition, so they're not the same exact platform. That you learn something in Salesforce and then you've got to learn a different thing for the Salesforce offering for service or for marketing or whatever. And whereas HubSpot is an integrated platform. And they've got very good. HubSpot's getting a little bit notorious for this too, but they've got very good ratchets on the pricing, and you end up paying more and more and more each year. And that didn't used to be true with HubSpot. You could lock in prices for a long time. There's a bit more of a ratchet now with HubSpot. I think a lot of ambitious companies are burdening themselves with Salesforce. I think they are missing out on an opportunity to choose something that's a little bit more approachable, usable, effective, cheaper, and better integrated with other systems. Having said all of that, I would say as we are, as a business, as a marketing consultancy, going up and working with larger and larger upscale companies, and when we built 3 websites for PLCs in the last 18 months, for example. We're seeing a lot more Salesforce incumbency. We're seeing quite large sales teams. Now, we would love to move them to HubSpot, but I think right now, out of our client base, 20% have Salesforce for CRM and HubSpot for marketing and a HubSpot website. So what we're also finding we're having to do and do with some capability and skill, although it takes quite a lot, is integrating HubSpot and Salesforce, so that leads are coming in through websites into HubSpot initially, and then they're being synced over to Salesforce. In the olden days, we used to see a lot more Microsoft Dynamics, and we're just not seeing that at all. So that's, I think, also an indication of, I think HubSpot would love this to become a 2-horse race. Anyway, that's an interesting observation finding that we had. Let's talk about a couple of other things that these findings show. First of all, 2/3 or so of our survey aren't doing enough video. They haven't got video on their websites. They haven't got, or at least we're not seeing YouTube and Vimeo. They might be doing it with other platforms. But having video on websites is valuable. Having video as part of your marketing content is invaluable and essential. And I'll give you an example, even for Articulate. This is going to end up being a video, and it's going to generate social media clips, and it's going to be turned into a blog, and it's going out live on LinkedIn right now, and it's going to be sent out. So this one presentation, which takes a fair amount of time, and by the way, a big hat tip to my colleague Sean, who prepared the report and prepared these slides for me today. It takes a certain amount of work to prepare these webinars and do them, but actually to deliver it this half an hour, and then it turns into all this wonderful content. It becomes quite an efficient way of generating content, and I think companies that aren't planning on these content pipelines that start with video, I think are missing out. And I had another example today. I run a podcast, host a podcast for one of our clients called Black Dot Solutions, where I get to interview incredibly interesting open source intelligence analysts. Okay, it's very geeky and interesting for people into that kind of thing, including me. But those podcasts turn into videos that get uploaded, turn into blog posts, turn into social media clips, turn into email, and it's the main source of thought leadership, apart from the flagship reports and the occasional blog that they produce. So video is, I think, critical, and I think people need to be building it in. And it doesn't mean high production value, film crew video. It can actually be quite lo-fi. Look, my mother says I have a face made for radio, right? I'm no Tom Cruise. Second thing, this use of heat mapping and user journey recording is, I think, people who have this and use it have a real insight into how people are experiencing their website, and it can be a source of data rather than opinion, like where people drop off in conversion journeys and what people look at before or after they go to a demo page or a sign-up page. These kinds of things are really, really interesting. And I'll give you a small example of what I mean. A few years ago, probably 5-6 years ago now, I used to run a wine business on the site because I'm a wine geek, amongst other things. And so I would import this wine. My wife and I would run this business, and we'd have our website. The website's still there, but you can't buy wine anymore. It's called Vincata.com. Vincata.com. And we had a whole e-commerce site built out, and there you could check out. And I was watching. We were using Lucky Orange, but it's functionally similar to Hotjar. Looking at people, working out people who actually put things in their basket but didn't buy, and people who checked out and why they didn't check out, and so on. And one of the things we noticed was when we were looking at people on mobile, which was more than 50% of our visitors, we thought we were being really clever because there was a pop-up saying, fill in this, give us your email address and get this free guide to wine tasting, and fill in this thing and get a 10% discount. But actually on mobile, what was happening was these pop-ups were coming up and they were obscuring the website. You couldn't actually get to the website because we just, it looked great on your desktop. So just even picking out sort of obvious user journey, user experience problems like that by watching people as they visit your website. As I said though earlier, most people have this installed with this sort of intention and then never look at the videos. And that is just slow and stupid and a little bit of privacy weight as well as page weight. So this shows an interest in usability. I would imagine out of that 11%, only a quarter are actually looking at the data. Next thing, I am increasingly, having been very sort of wary and skeptical about email marketing for a very long time, and certainly email as a sales tool, very, very wary and skeptical, because we're all getting these sort of AI-driven spammy emails. I probably get 100 emails a day from people trying to sell me stuff, and I'm sure you do as well. But if you can offer something that is relevant, useful, and interesting, it is one of the few ways now where you can build a direct, trusted, content-driven relationship with potential customers. Because social media is getting enshittified. If you want to reach people, you kind of got to pay. Organic search is still really important, but it's being nibbled and eaten away by zero-click search and AI mode and LLMs. This back to this personal thing. So I think companies that want to use this need to go beyond the sign up for our newsletter and really make a play for it. They need to be doing something really interesting and useful. A really good example of this is our client Search Pilot that does programmatic sort of SEO testing for e-commerce companies, and what they do is incredibly clever and interesting. And if you're into e-commerce SEO and you're not signed up for their flight test newsletter, you're missing out on really powerful insights. But it's insight driven, it's expert content, it's authoritative, it's coming with an opinion, you're interested in that. Podcasts also have a little bit of this aspect to them, but email is still this, one-to-one direct relationship into the inbox. And I think then going through making a special effort for it, making sure the content is interesting, critical. So I did a webinar just before Christmas about writing emails that people want to read, and I also did another webinar about widening the mid-funnel. If you go to articulatemarketing.com/webinars, you can find those two webinars, and it will talk more about what good email marketing looks like. But in our data for this report, the presence of HubSpot and the presence of MailChimp show that people are still trying to make this work. So good, but only 13% MailChimp. Interesting. Okay. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on, and gosh, I'm almost out of time. Where did that half an hour go? Thank you for sitting with me. Is around analytics and reporting. If you had asked me a year ago, or certainly 2.5 years ago before we did the first of these surveys, how many websites used Google Analytics, I would have said 75% plus. And I would have probably recommended you used it. Certainly going back 3 to 5 years ago, it was just a default choice. But it has increasingly, I think, raised some privacy questions. I don't think concerns, but it's, when you try to make it work in a compatible way with GDPR and you really want to do that properly, it takes some work. You're providing this huge amount of data to Google about people's behavior and activity on your website and their activity on your website, which is sort of increasingly, I don't want to be doom-mongering about it, but under scrutiny, shall we say, increasingly scrutinized. And I think people are choosing privacy first analytics platforms. So Piwik Matomo is increasing, and it's now not quite, but almost level pegging with Google Analytics. And I think Google Analytics' presence has dropped considerably. And I think this is something that's worth exploring. For the two core websites that I run that have a commercial impact on my life. One is obviously articulate marketing. We still have Google Analytics, and we have now a decade plus worth of data, and that's sort of that historical comparability is interesting. There are obviously things you can do in Google Analytics that are harder with other tools and with HubSpot's own reporting if you're interested in e-commerce and you've got lots of reporting set up in GA. And it has a lot of depth and sophistication to the tool set, but the other website, I switched it off. We don't have it, just HubSpot Analytics, and it is faster, and I haven't noticed any decline in traffic. So pays your money, takes your choice with that. Increasingly, because AI is being used with analytics and in almost every other sort of aspect of marketing, thinking about AI, among other things, from a privacy perspective is important. And I think this is perhaps the subject of a whole other webinar that we need to do next year, because I'm conscious I'm almost out of time. So finally, to wrap things up here, if you want to get a hold of the report, you can email me, you can download the report from our website, or by clicking on this link in the PDF when you get it. Do join me again for my webinar about optimizing HubSpot pricing, and upcoming webinars will email you about them over the next few weeks as they get scheduled in. If you have any questions, if you want to discuss anything that arises from this webinar, please get in touch or book a meeting. Love to talk to you. No hard sell, no hassle. Just an interesting conversation, I hope. And that brings me to the end of this webinar. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.